What we figured we would do here at SDH, when we have the time, is do something a little different. There are a lot of stories that go by the wayside during the span of a week. And frankly, when there's time to kind of catch our breath a little bit, put them together in one place, they can be serious. They can be very serious, like some of them are this week. They can be worrisome. They can send a shot across your bow. They can kind of warn you about something that could be coming down the road. And there's just some stuff that would make you kind of sit there and go, I didn't know about that. Some of it's lighthearted. Some of it has to do with lower division stuff. Some of it has to do with newsmakers and what we call here at SDH required reading. And it's just stuff that I come across, frankly, and I think you might want to know about. So, welcome to the Back Page. So this week on the Back Page, we're going to go a couple different directions. And there have been some stories that were published that we didn't have the time to catch up with when it came to SDH in general. And like I said, some of it's pretty serious. And we'll have some backup from some places to kind of lay the story out and give you the background that you might need to help you along with the required reading as we go. And, for the rundown this week, it's looking at just how perilous it is to be in the championship. We've talked about it a lot. And when it comes to being in the championship in the EFL, when it comes to kind of pay your bills and meet your bills and how tough it is. News on that. Disturbing testimony on the Hill in Parliament in Canada involving the Canada Soccer Association. So we'll have some background on that. We'll update you there. Interesting stuff that happened involving Allianz Field, and a story came out this past week involving the development that was thought to be a part of the development of Allianz Field. It's not there, and so there's some new news on that and what the possible future could be. And then, of course, there's the lighter stories that come through in the lower divisions, some light, some not, but lower divisions also have some good stories there as well. And a departure we'll finish up this week with on the Back Page. So first and foremost, we'll start things off, as we mentioned, with the serious stuff. And it has to do with a meeting on the Hill involving Canada Soccer from our friends at the Canadian Press. NDP Member of Parliament Peter Julian said at a parliamentary committee meeting Thursday, Canada Soccer is worse at handling important issues than Hockey Canada. The statement came during a questioning of former Canada Soccer President Stephen Reid. The Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage focused on the hiring and conduct of disgraced former soccer coach Bob Berarda by a BC community club, including the abuse alleged to have been committed by him. Now your backstory. Here are two pieces that have aired within the last year. The first from CBC Vancouver and Berarda's engagement and involvement with the Vancouver Whitecaps and criminal charges that followed.
I don't think I understood the damage that being silenced as we were for so many years, the toll it took.
Kira McCormick sounded the alarm years ago about her former soccer coach, Bob Berarda. Now she's sickened to read the report detailing how Canada Soccer mishandled complaints, but hopeful it brings change.
It was just such a perfect storm in terms of all these players with these big dreams and everything. It meant everything to play for the national team. And then that was literally what was weaponized against us.
The report found a continuing pattern of harassing emails, sexting, flirting, and other inappropriate behavior from a coach with significant power described as godlike. Berarda was allowed to resign in 2008. The report focused on a statement about a mutual decision to part ways without mentioning harassment, calling it a gross mischaracterization of the circumstances and failed the victims of the harassment, their teammates, and the organization as a whole. With no oversight, the organization did not follow the procedures of their own harassment policy. The failure to terminate Berarda and impose disciplinary sanctions afforded him the opportunity to continue coaching, putting other players at potential risk. Canada Soccer did not respond to an interview request, saying in a statement it accepts the findings and recommendations and unequivocally apologizes for letting participants down.
These types of abuses and bullying are widespread. Many girls quit playing sports because of this before they have an opportunity to really see what their potential is.
Many are hopeful the spotlight on Hockey Canada will help spur similar traction here.
I want to see the same accountability.
Soccer Canada, Hockey Canada, and other national sports organizations need to be held to account, but also the Ministry of Sports and Sport Canada needs to be held to account.
Berarda currently awaits sentencing. He pleaded guilty to 3 counts of sexual assault and 1 of touching a young person for a sexual purpose. His lawyer did not want to comment on this new review given the ongoing court action. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
Second piece coming from Global News, and you hear also once again from some of the same players that you heard in that first story. But once again, when you have a name like Bob Berarda come up, there's a lot that has to be discussed. And the second interview, the second section of all of this comes from our friends at Global News. And Bob Berarda came up in a discussion once again over Canada Soccer, and it started with Sierra McCormick, how they mishandled sexual harassment allegations according to a report dating back to allegations in 2008. So here's the story that was put forth by Global News.
For 20 minutes, this soccer coach appeared over video before a North Vancouver provincial court judge, pleading guilty to 3 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of sexually touching a young person. And with that charge alone, Berarda could be in jail for at least 1 year or up to 14. The moment is a reflection of years of efforts from former soccer players to hold Berarda accountable. CBC News spoke to former Whitecaps players in the past.
I'm disgusted that another coach, behaved in this way and took advantage of the power dynamic between a coach and an athlete.
There's been such harm caused by the organization to so many people that are still coping and dealing with not only what they experienced as athletes, but in the aftermath of the, decades since then and trying to bring this to light.
The charges span 2 decades from 1988 to 2006 and involve 4 separate victims. Berarda was quietly let go from coaching duties in 2008 as a head coach for the under-20 women's national team and the Whitecaps women's team, but allegations of his wrongdoings followed. In February 2019, after a blog was published, more allegations came out on the former coach. Former Team Canada players alleged Berarda had sent sexualized text messages and made sexual comments to the players, touched players inappropriately, and used his position of power to make sexual advances. Fans staged major walkouts from the men's games to support the female players, and finally an investigation was launched by the Whitecaps.
Even in 2019, when we came forward, it took fan walkouts to even get them, 3 months later into a room with us.
Sentencing is expected to last 1 day and will happen later this year. Benit Brach, CBC News, Vancouver.
Circling back to the parliamentary committee meeting, Julian said, he continued, and he said, quite frankly, I believe Canada Soccer is worse than Hockey Canada in many respects when dealing with these important issues, Julian said, referring to allegations of sexual abuse and mismanagement within both sporting bodies. Reid served as president of Canada Soccer from 2017 to 2020. Previously as president of BC Soccer from 06 to 09, also served in a vice president role and chair of the finance committee for Canada Soccer. He told the parliamentary committee he was unaware that Berarda had been hired by the community club until 2017. Berarda was sentenced, as you heard in the previous piece, to nearly 16 months in jail in 2022 for sex offenses that, quote, immeasurably harmed 4 female teenage athletes. MP Rachel Thomas. We know that a plethora of young girls and young women have been sexually assaulted by Mr. Berarda. We know that likely could have been prevented had you used your voice. What would you say to those victims now? Reid said, quote, he was absolutely appalled, end quote, by what happened, wanted to extend his apologies. After roughly 30 minutes of questioning, the committee took the decision to have Reid answer questions under oath. Quote, I didn't have the authority as president of BC Soccer to go out and alert the community, end quote, Reed said when asked about whether he would have told others about Berarda's misconduct. Reed was repeatedly questioned by politicians about the lack of action he allegedly took when it came to protecting players from Berarda. Quote, "You had a responsibility to ensure there were no further victims," end quote, Julian said. It appears that the entire Canada Soccer mechanism failed in that regard, and I'm quite frankly stunned by what you're telling us today. What we've established this afternoon, according to Liberal MP Lisa Hefner, is that you felt no moral onus to make sure that other young athletes weren't at risk of abuse, given the abuse you are already aware of after Bob Berarda left your purview. Reed said the system and how the various bodies operated at the time didn't have mechanisms in place to track coaches who may have been accused of misconduct. Coastal FC, the community soccer club that previously employed Berarda as a coach, did not immediately respond to questions from the Canadian press about his employment. Reed was also questioned about the broadcasting and sponsorship deal Canada Soccer signed with Canada Soccer Business regarding the distribution of the rights of the Canadian international women's and men's matches and the process of reaching that deal. So that's news out of Canada this week. Second one on the table comes to us from our friends at The Athletic. And with The Athletic, we talk a lot about promotion, relegation, what it could mean in a competitive sense, what it means to those teams and those players, and what it could mean financially. And we've discussed what it means to try and manage finances in the EFL. Our friends at The Athletic, article by Philip Buckingham to start your weekend. Championship clubs' finances are broken. It's the headline that Buckingham uses. And we have had some relegations after the early action on Saturday. And it is getting close to determine which teams will be going down and which teams might be actually staying in the championship this season. With the way things are, with one match remaining, for all intents and purposes, Blackpool and Wigan are set to be relegated. If they were to win their final matches of the season, it would take them to 44 points. But they would have to overcome margins in goal difference with Huddersfield and Reading. Wigan, remember, had the 3-point deductions for not paying their players repeatedly. They're at the bottom after a loss at 41 points. They're behind Blackpool by 2 goals in goal difference. And right now, Reading is the other team that is in the relegation zone, 1 goal behind Huddersfield Town at 44 points. Huddersfield, though, however, has matches in hand with everyone and could basically just have 2 kickabouts and stay up. So your situation in the championship is it's pretty dire for folks. So you right now have 3 teams that will go. 2 of them look like they're going to be decided. And the article by The Athletic breaks it all down. Had Wigan, once again, not had that 3-point deduction, they would at least be in the chase to escape. They didn't pay salaries punctually on 4 occasions. Reading would be safe if they didn't have their 6-point deduction that they were given after breaching their budget restrictions. Derby County, you'll remember last year before that it was Sheffield Wednesday. Wigan relegated to League One in 1920. It's because of a 12-point deduction that they couldn't avoid when they were placed into administration. Buckingham points out, not since 2018-19 have all 3 sides relegated to League One succumbed without the burden of a penalty weighing them down, and that means all the financials. Championship, according to Buckingham, has become the division of financial strain and distress. The majority of its 24 clubs are now conditioned to accept loss-making. Money spent on wages consistently and comfortably exceeds the collective revenue each year. The 2021 season finished with wage costs at 125% of the championship's total revenue, and last term, albeit with only 19 of the 24 clubs so far filing their latest set of accounts, continued the trend into a fifth successive campaign. 14 championship clubs have already shown they committed more to wages than they earned in total revenue. Kieran McGuire, who is a great source, he is the host of the Price of Football podcast, at Kieran McGuire on Twitter, has calculated the operational losses for last season to average out at just under $600,000 a week for every championship club. Only 2 of the 19 clubs have posted their accounts for last season that turned a pre-tax profit. 13 others posting losses north of $10 million. The average pre-tax deficit for the 19 clubs so far has been over $20 million. Fulham, Bournemouth, and Forest, the 3 that were promoted, collectively lost £158 million on their way to the Premier League. £158 million. Quote, the current model is broken, says one senior figure at an established championship club, speaking on the grounds of anonymity to protect relationships. The problem is that the championship is the meat in the sandwich between the Premier League and League One and League Two. If you look at the wages in the Premier League and then the players you need to get there, if you want to compete in the championship to get promoted, you have to have players who are a better standard. Let's say the average championship club's given around £8 million a year for media rights and has a turnover between $15 and $20 million. It's tough to compete. You're up against at least 5 clubs with parachute money. Then the other club's throwing money at it. Your wage bill has to be at least 100% of our turnover. Average wage bill of a club not receiving parachute payments is probably around the £22 million mark. Most clubs won't see that in their turnover. You could turn around and say, well, why don't all the championship clubs just refuse to pay that level of wages? But it doesn't work like that. There'll always be someone that does. For any club to compete, you have to accept losing money, end quote. Luton Town and Millwall, as an example. Wage bills that exceeded revenue last season. Blackburn, wage to turnover at 146%. Birmingham City, Preston North End, 177 and 178%, respectively. All have made the conscious decision, according to Buckingham, to lose money in order to remain competitive with the clubs and receive parachute payments from the Prem. Burnley, Watford, Norwich, Sheffield United, West Brom have received between $38 and $45 million in funding this season following relegation from the top flight in the last 2 years. 4 times given to each of the other 19 clubs through TV rights and solidarity payments. Sheffield Wednesday, Derby County. Reading next. Cumulative losses, according to their most recent accounts, stood at £191 million. If West Brom can't win promotion, next season will be their first without Premier League money, either through membership or parachute payments, in 20 years. Though their last account showed a pre-tax profit of £5.4 million, they added there was a material uncertainty over the future of the club if cash cannot be raised. Stoke, Bristol City, Preston, Blackburn, Cardiff all oversaw losses of £11 million or more last season. What could it mean to somebody like Everton? Our friends at The Athletic, as a part of their podcast network and their YouTube channels, had this bit of analysis. What could happen as Everton is trying to build a stadium, staring at the prospect of going down, this for the second year in a row, but this was at this point last year.
Protocols, as they're known now, are under review, but essentially they allow for cumulative losses of £39 million over a 3-year period, and this is why there's intense pressure on player sales. Relegation would also represent a serious challenge were it to happen before the stadium at Bramley-Moore Dock is completed. As it stands, despite the imminent reduction of revenue after the suspension of their USM sponsorships, the club are still confident that the stadium will be delivered. Everton have had positive talks with interested parties for the private investment, which will form a major part of the ground's funding. The announcement of a resulting deal, though, may have to wait until Everton's fate in terms of their Premier League status is known. Relegation would mean that JP Morgan and MUFG could simply not put the same deal to the market, and the club may have to fund the project through equity, while they remain outside of the top flight. Whether that would be possible with Moshiri's fortune impacted and cash flow overall challenged is debatable. But Everton had built a case for relegation into their planning and accounted for spending one season in the Championship before returning at the first time of asking, as West Ham and Newcastle have done recently. Both those clubs' attendances and matchday revenues were not severely impacted during one season in the second tier. And even though the potential for USM to snap up a lucrative naming rights deal for the stadium is on ice, Everton can still be confident that others will want to replace the Russian firm. The Athletic understands that, as a package, naming rights remain a considerable asset. But even with these best-case scenarios, relegation naturally threatens other problems. Everton will have to part company with £10 million a season shirt-front sponsor Kazoo this summer, and while good progress is being made to secure a replacement, maybe a more lucrative deal if they remain in the Premier League, relegation often leads to a dramatic reduction in the value of such inventory. As an example, another recently relegated Premier League side saw the value of their shirt-front sponsorship deal decrease from £5 million per season to £850,000 a year in the Championship. Even if they do stay up, finding a replacement for USM's sponsorship of their Finch Farm training ground will also be tough. That £12 million a year would be difficult to replicate regardless, let alone from a lower level. It poses another question, and a long list of difficult questions were the worst to happen.
The article from The Athletic continues and kind of looks at things through the prism of Rotherham United, who have made the choice not to spend a boatload of money. They'll survive this year. They have 2 matches to go, 46 points. They're 2 points clear. Basically, once again, they could have two kickabouts and they'd be fine. So, Rotherham United making a choice. Last time that they were in the Championship, had a wage bill of just over £8 million, 2/3 of their turnover, eventual pre-tax loss of $800,000. Could have been avoided if they didn't have a season played behind closed doors because of COVID. Relegated back in the spring of 21, immediate promotion. They're doing it all over again. And so the article continues with a really good interview with owner Tony Stewart. No, not that Tony Stewart, but an interview with Tony Stewart in discussing what it's like for Rotherham to continue. So interesting back and forth in the article from The Athletic about Championship clubs' finances are broken. Philip Buckingham. Also on the board, it was an article about Allianz Field. And we all know about the development, with new stadia and things like that. You always sit there and you wonder, okay, what's going to happen? You're going to have growth. It's going to be a lot of, in theory, it's going to be a lot of live, work, play. The idea was back in 2019, would Allianz Field revitalize that area of St. Paul? Developers have been named, those kinds of things. And right now you're still kind of wondering what the thoughts are. So at finance-commerce.com from Bridge Tower Media, Brian Johnson kind of looked at things around Allianz Field. Allianz opened in 2019, supposed to be a springboard for additional development, an urban village, live, work, play. Most of the real estate still is a blank canvas. Though some new housing has sprouted up just outside of the stadium-anchored site, the venue itself has attracted enthusiastic soccer fans to the neighborhood. The surrounding campus largely bare asphalt and open space. Local real estate experts say the 34-acre development site has some pluses, including close proximity to public transportation with connections to the downtowns of St. Paul and Minneapolis. But once again, you get into timing. Snelling Midway, hit hard by the pandemic, came less than a year after the stadium opened. There's also the mention of the civil unrest following the murder of George Floyd. Dr. Bill McGuire led the charge on construction of the privately financed stadium and is a point person for stadium area development. He was asked about it, but he declined to go into detail about any potential new instruction. In a text message, however, McGuire said there's a lot of issues floating about with the interest rate environment, bank liquidity instability following the Silicon Valley Bank failure in California. As of 2020, planned development on the campus included a mix of retail, service, commercial, hospitality, residential, office, public, and private open space. 948 multifamily housing units, the hotel, square feet of office space, retail space. City's master plan for the campus called for 1 million square feet of office space on the full build-out. To the big extent, market forces and conditions, according to Johnson, beyond the control of the development team, have been a reality check for the site. That goes into the interviews there. Finance-commerce.com. In the business and economy section by Brian Johnson, talking about Allianz Field, still waiting for new development. So keep an eye on situations like that. To wrap things up this week on the back page, once again, one of the stalwarts of live broadcast television is hanging it up. Jeff Stelling, for those of you that might have, in older days, before access to Sky and things like that, might have had to, chase after through VPNs and things like that, and found out about Soccer Saturday on Sky. Rapid fire analysis, staring at goals, guys wearing headsets, reenacting play-by-play of action in the Premier League, all of the joy and the chasing and all of the elements that are attached to the 10 o'clock kickoffs, regardless of division in the sport of soccer in England. For the second time, he's hanging up his mic. He announced it today. He's leaving Soccer Saturday at the end of football season after 25 years as the host of the show. You remember 2 years ago he hung it up. He said he was going to because Sky decided to sack all of his three of his co-presenters, Phil Thompson, Charlie Nicholas, and Matt Letitia. Reversed his decision before now saying once again that he's hanging them up. He's been at Sky more than 30 years. You knew about his celebrations for Hartlepool United since he is a co-owner, minority owner. They wanted to bring in younger co-presenters to be with him. Chris Kamara had to step down after suffering from a speech apraxia disorder. And the exchanges are legendary between Jeff and Chris Kamara, and all you've got to do is look them up on YouTube for things like this.
Still Bournemouth come forward. Chris Kamara.
Yeah, they're still having a go, Jeff. I think there's a bit of time added on because they made another substitution. Everton, they took off Aruna Kone. They've got a chance, Jeff. It comes across the boat. It's a goal. Stanislav makes it 3-3.
For the first time, he could have said unbelievable, Jeff, and he didn't. And you can see there's the Huddersfield equaliser. Let's hear about it. Chris Kamara.
It's 2-1 now, Carly, if you can hear me.
How many times do I have to tell him about calling me Carly?
Papa Bouba Diop, the man mounted himself, is playing as a striker. And he's got Healy one side of him and Diamanti Kamara the other side. Papa Bouba Diop with a header. Ah, it's a goal. It's a goal, Jeff. Is it David Healy's running away? Andy Durso's playing on. Sorry, my monitor's down again. I'm looking over my shoulder. I don't really know. The assistant hasn't given it. Oh, the assistant hasn't given it, I don't think, Jeff. No, the referee hasn't given it either. Don't really know what's happening, Jeff.
Let's go find out what's happening in the game in Crystal Palace and Leicester. Palace starting pretty brightly. Has there been any threat at all from Leicester, though? Chris Kamara.
Oh, there has, Jeff. It's a goal! Yes! Wilfred Zaha! He just got the ball, played to his right foot. He opened his foot out and he hit it with the side foot ferocity into the back of the net. It's been a cracker, Jeff.
How's the second half started, Cammy?
Very, very open, Jeff. Both teams going for it. We've had a couple of half chances here and there. One penalty shout, which referee Phil Dowd turned away, and it certainly could have been Trippier tripped Schlupp, but he pushed. Schlupp had pushed Trippier before. Trippier tripped up Slush, if you know what I mean. Anyway, we've had a few attacks in the second half, but no more goals.
And who is Slush? Cammy, it wasn't that far off being two.
No, not at all. A decent strike from Famara Dadau, and goalkeeper has to be alert down to his right-hand side, and he's groping and grasping and pushes it out for a corner. Yes, they are well on top, Bristol City.
Yeah, well on top and gone close to increasing that lead with Famara Dadau. When they're still playing down at Loftus Road, Chris Kamara.
You still need me at the end of the game, Carly.
I've told you, Cammy, stop calling me Carly in public.
Carly.
For goodness sake.
Oh, the move was just scintillating, Jeff. Their football arsenal is on another level, but Spurs are fighting like beavers, defending for their lives. It's a terrific game, still 1-0.
Did I hear that correctly? Yeah. Fighting like beavers. Not tigers or lions, but beavers, those ferocious little devils. Crystal Palace finally beginning to threaten Manchester City. Chris Kamara.
They should have been level, punching down the left-hand side. A beautiful ball into the box, onto Benteke's head. He's got to head it anywhere to the side of Claudio Brava, but he can only head it straight at him. Sakari Banga, Sanya nearly brought down punching as well for a penalty, but they took the corner and nothing came of it.
Sakari Banya back in the starting lineup today for the first time in 7 games. The Canaries are on show down at Upton Park. It's not just the Canaries though, Cammy.
No, there's a pigeon on the pitch, Jeff. Walter is on there and he won't get off, and so the game has been abandoned for a pigeon. Just somebody run at it and it'll fly off, won't it?
Another goal in the game at the Emirates Stadium. Burnley were 2-0 behind, and all those who went for 3-0 to Arsenal are now looking mighty smart. Chris Kamara.
3-0 here, Carly.
I've told you before, Cammy, do not call me Carly in public. There have been 41 attempts on goal now, and a 5th goal, Chris Kamara.
Unbelievable, Jeff, what a cracking game. The ball bouncing all around the box like a pinball, and eventually bounced up in the air to Charlie Austin. Well, he wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth. He just nodded it in. 3-2 QPR.
And we're off to Fratton Park, where there's been a red card, but for who, Chris Kamara?
I don't know, Jeff, has there? I must have missed that. Red card.
Chris, have you not been watching? I haven't. I don't know where that's come from, Chris. I have no idea what has happened there. What's happened, Chris?
I don't know, Jeff. I don't know. The rain must have got in my eyes, Jeff.
But Chris, let me tell you, according to our sources, Anthony van den Boer has been sent off for a second bookable offence. Get your fingers out and count up the number of Portsmouth players who are on the field.
No, you're right. I saw him go off, but I thought they were bringing a sub on, Jeff.
As professional as ever, Cammy.
Still 0-0.
Cutting-edge reports on Gillette Soccer Saturday.
And thanks to our friends at Sky. But Jeff Stelling's hanging him up. And what I wanted to do to kind of wrap things up this week is go back to a back and forth, and it's one of the more legendary discussions that he had on Soccer Saturday. It's courtesy of our friends at Soccer AM, and this happened 9 years ago, and it's a big back and forth, but it's worth your time. Jeff, the week before this conversation, called the sacking of Scunthorpe's manager, Russ Wilcox, manager at the time. He called it shameful. So Scunthorpe chairman Peter Swan challenged him live on the air. Here is the exchange that the two of them had. It's a long one, but it's worth it.
Of course, this week, Scunthorpe United sacked their manager, Russ Wilcox, and the club chairman, Peter Swan, was most unhappy about my assessment of it. Scunthorpe are at Gillingham, and it's from there we are joined by the chairman. Peter, good afternoon to you. So, tell us, why did you sack Russ Wilcox?
There comes a time in any club where you have to sit down and assess the future, and it was at this time that I decided to sit down with Russ, have a heart-to-heart with him, and try and change the fortunes of the football club, as every chairman does. And it's always difficult, especially with people that you care about. And he is a friend, still a friend. And those decisions are the most difficult to make, I think, for a chairman. And sometimes when comments are thrown at us, they are sometimes hard to take. We understand it's a harsh and very hard environment in football, but there's a limit to that. And I didn't like the way that you worded the comments in your piece.
But do you see, Peter, from an outsider's perspective, and I made it clear I was an outsider and I don't know the goings-on in there. This is a man who set a world record last season for you. He got the club promotion as well. He was voted LMA Manager of the Year and received a Special Merit Award. Did that not earn him any extra time?
Absolutely, anybody would take those into consideration. But what you've got to remember is that when you make a comment like that and you make it in the press, that it's got to be substantiated. And, you know, I'll take you back a little way to the Tony Pulis matter, Jeff, was where you said that you couldn't really blame or discuss either side of the argument and know what was going on because you didn't know the ins and outs. So you weren't going to comment. And all of a sudden you were commenting on Scunthorpe, who actually you don't know nothing about. You know nothing about me, Russ, whatever we did behind those doors. There's no negative press at all about this split. It's a very amicable, professional and dignified split. The only undignified thing was the comments that you made, the shamefulness about the situation and the fact that I didn't respect Russ. You know, those statements you make go out publicly and it makes the club and myself look bad when actually we've handled this situation really, really well.
Yeah, but that's, you know, because it was an opinion piece. Peter, we're paid to give our opinions, and you must understand, surely, that from the outside, 11 games for a man like that, who served the club as a player for 6 years, he served the club as assistant manager, as caretaker manager, as full-time manager as well. You must understand that people outside will look upon it as being a really harsh decision. Is that not something you accept?
Harsh decision is fine. I haven't got a problem with that. It wasn't shameful, Jeff. It wasn't shameful. Okay, it was a hard decision made by a professional body,
11 games,
made by a
Peter.
businessman like myself.
11 games, Peter, and of those 11 games, you lost 8 of them. 6 of those were against top half sides. Another one was against a side in 13th place. Another was against the playoff finalists of last season. You've got an easy run of games, comparatively speaking, coming up. Why did you not give him another 3 games?
But isn't that why you can make that decision, because you don't have any consequences? You can say that because if you give him 3 games, there are no consequences to what you say. If I give him 3 games, that's not what I wanted to give him. In the end, I'm not going to talk about his past. He had a great job last year. We worked very hard. He had a huge amount of backing from myself. He's had another 25% of the budget this year, and we did the best that we possibly could. In that circumstances, we sat down and felt if a new manager was going to come in, the most important thing is there was a reasonable, stable footing for that manager to at least grasp hold of the team and move us forward. 3 games, 4 defeats down the line, that might not have happened. And it's easy. We can have a look at that in hindsight, and it might have worked. But in the end, I'm here to make those hard decisions. And I just find it very, very tough when, you know, we're then chastised in the press by people who don't know us and who don't know what we've just been through over the last 3 or 4 days. You know, that's what makes it hard. And using the words like disrespect and shameful, I think is out of order. Yes, you could have done it. It was very harsh and you don't agree with it. That's your opinion. But to actually, you know, say that I don't respect Russ is out of order. And that's the only thing I got from it was I was so disappointed after all the hard work of doing a very professional and dignified sort of process, which we were all happy with, including Russ. You've not spoken to Russ, you've not spoken to me, you've not spoken to the club. So how you can come up with that sort of statement and it not affect, you've got all these followers now who are now perceiving the club differently because you've said it. That's the only reason that the club will be perceived in this way, is because you've said it. And that's why I'm disappointed.
But Peter,
football's a very, very fickle sport. It is difficult.
Yeah, no, I understand. But, Peter, we all have our views about football in different clubs. You know, when we have a view about Manchester United, it doesn't mean it's because I've spoken to Louis van Gaal. You know, and Scunthorpe are no different from that. There's no reason why we shouldn't have opinions about it, is there? But also, I mean, I look at some of the comments that you've made over the recent weeks. September the 15th, you referred to the fact that injuries were rife. September the 19th, you said in the local newspaper once again that regarding Russ Wilcox, there were few and doubters amongst the fans were few and far between. How can 3 league games change your opinion so drastically?
So what should I do then? Should I go and vilify him in the press, or should I actually back my manager 100% until the very last moment? That's what I've done. I've completely backed him financially. I've worked very, very hard to try and make it work for him. And certainly over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've done that. And I believe I've done everything, and the club has done everything to try and get us out of this position. And, you know, in the end, yes, it is harsh, but that's all it is. the words that you use, I didn't enjoy, and that's the reason I tweeted you. That's the reason I've come on here. Is I don't believe that you have the right to call it shameless or disrespectful. If you call it harsh, I totally agree with you. Football's harsh. It's a fickle sport. People go after 3 or 4 games. People go after less. Russ has been here for 10 months. The last 16 games have got 13 points. Okay, I have to look at that as well.
Yeah, but equally, last season you went 28 games unbeaten and he got you to a higher level. Can I ask you, Peter, when did you decide to sack him? Was it immediately after the game?
After what game? After the Notts County game?
Yeah.
Yeah, after the Notts County game, I was pretty sure in my mind that that's what I wanted to do. But obviously, I spoke to Russ in the morning and then spoke to his number 2, Scully. We came to agreement that the best thing would be for him to leave the club. And that's what it was, a business decision. But there's nothing else in the press there. There is nothing in the press where I've vilified him at any stage. I have supported him 100%. And if you talk to him, he'll tell you that as well.
No, and to defend myself, I at no stage suggested that you'd vilified him at any time at all. So what do you expect of your next manager then? Because, I look back at Brian Laws, and Brian was sacked after 4 defeats in his first 16 games. So, I mean this seriously, Peter. What does a manager have to do to achieve what you regard success at Scunthorpe?
It's really difficult, isn't it? To be honest about it and try and be positive. The manager's job is one of the most difficult jobs there are in football. And I don't think you could have extended contracts. I mean, you can imagine if you gave somebody 12 months and they had to do the 12 months, they've lost their first 12 games, your crowds are going down to 50%, and you can't do anything about it. We're businessmen. This is a business. We're putting our money in. So it is difficult. My next manager, Mark, we're hoping all the best for him. We'll support him. It's a long-term project with him. He's got a long contract there, and we're going to do it. We're going to use him, obviously, to take us into the new stadium. And, he's got the experience to take us out of the bottom 4. I've had a good chat to him. We get on. We know where we're going to go. And all I can do is focus on that. I can't tell you what's going to happen in 12 months, 16 months' time. I've been at this club for 18 months. I've come in. I've tried to change the philosophy. I've done that now. And even though we're a small club, I do believe that we deserve the chance to improve ourselves, and that's what we're doing by moving into a new stadium. And all that is being financed by myself. So when you look at it, those finite decisions have to be made by me. I cannot look back and say, I should have done this or I should have done that. As a chairman, I have to say, this is the decision, I move on. Now I make the most of it.
OK, Peter, look, shall we agree on harsh rather than shameful?
If you take them out, and if you take those 2 words out, and disrespectful, and you say it's hard done by and you don't agree with it, I'm happy with that. It isn't a problem. I just felt it was a little bit harsh on the club and myself, in that sort of terminology.
OK, we'll take them out and replace them with harsh. Look, Peter, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
No, pleasure. Thank you for letting me ask a few questions.
OK.
And once again, thanks to our friends at Soccer AM. Speaking of Scunthorpe, and speaking of Peter Swan, who had a 10-year reign as majority shareholder, Scunthorpe has dropped out of the Football League in a double relegation. 2 years, 2 relegations. They will be in the National League North next year. I mean, a dozen years ago they were in the championship. Now they will be in National League North next year. Successful takeover in January by David Hilton, ending Swan's reign. And so we end on Scunthorpe this week in the lower divisions. So it was an interesting week on a bunch of different fronts, and hopefully this is just a piece of it as we all go through all of this together. If there's something that I missed, if there's something that you want to share with everyone, we have our Discord. We have the ways of communicating through all of our social media, and we always find ways to communicate with one another. But if there's something that I missed on the back page that you want to include, let us know. We can add it to the stacks. But once again, thanks to all of our friends at Global News, CBC Vancouver, Soccer AM, The Athletic, and all of the papers that we go through on the back page for all the stories that we miss, that we get the chance to catch up with. through folks like the Canadian Press and Sportsnet on a weekly basis. So enjoy your matches, enjoy Major League Soccer as you do on a weekend, and we'll be back at it again Monday morning. This has been another round of the Back Page here at SDH.